Now we're going to learn some basic techniques for cross stitching. If you'd like to follow along, this pattern is available on the tutorial page. You'll first take a look at your pattern and find the center by using the two black arrows on the edge of your grid. You can see in the center of this is a Z symbol. You can see down the bottom this corresponds to 4265 VAR. We can find the Z symbol on our thread card and we can see the thread attached. The VAR is actually a special type of thread which is called a variation or variegated thread. These threads are usually made up of multiple colours in a single strand. You can see this one here goes from purple to yellow. Just keep an eye out for those VAR numbers on your chart as you'll stitch them how I'm going to show you in this first part of the tutorial. You'll then get your 6 strands of thread and separate out 2 of them. You can do this by gently pulling them apart, ensuring that the thread doesn't knot up. If you find this difficult, you can always pull 1 strand at a time from the bundle of 6. Once you have your 2 strands, make sure both your threads are lined up together. Fold over one end until you have a small little loop, and then find your needle and thread your needle by pushing the loop of thread through the eye of the needle. Once you have your needle threaded, you can just tie a knot in the other end if you prefer. However, I'll show you a way to catch the end of your thread and have a no knot back on the back of your piece. So to do this, what we're going to do is refer to our pattern and pick where we're going to start, usually in the center. You'll then find the center of your fabric, and you will poke your needle through the bottom left hole of the square you're going to work in. You'll pull your thread through until you have about a 10 centimeter tail on the back. Now I would suggest putting your finger on that tail so you can hold it in place so it doesn't slip through to the front. Your next stitch will then be through the diagonally opposite hole, or in this case the top right. You'll poke your needle from the front of the fabric and pull your thread through. Now you'll have the first leg of your cross stitch. Make sure not to bring the tail around to the front now. Now you'll turn your piece over and have a look at what that tail's doing. You'll need to pull it under your piece of working thread and then poke your needle through the hole underneath the one that you just went through, in this case the bottom right hand hole. Pull your thread, not quite all the way, and then flip your piece back over. Here you'll want to make sure the tail is under that loop at the back before you tighten it down. So you can just find your loop, then slip your tail underneath, and then tighten that loop right down until it catches that thread. Now your thread is nice and secure and you can continue stitching. So to finish this cross, we'll go through the top left hand corner or the diagonally opposite hole. we'll pull that through, and now we have our first completed cross stitch. Now we'll look at our pattern, and this is where I like to have a pen or a pencil or something to mark a stitch off as I'm doing it. So I'm just going to colour that one in to show that I've done it, and then I'll look for other stitches close by. So I'm going to do the one above it. So to do this, I'll just pick back up my piece, and then I will repeat the same thing I did before. First making the first leg of my cross stitch. This time I'm going through the top right hole, down to the bottom left hole, and then I'll go from the bottom right hole to the top left hole. Now there is one main thing to remember when you are doing your cross stitches. All the bottom legs should be slanted in one direction. For example, like this, slanted to the right, and all the top legs should be slanted in the other direction. For example, like this, all slanted to the left. By doing this, you'll keep all your stitches looking consistent and neat. Another top tip when you're stitching is to not pull the thread too tight. You want to pull it tight enough that it cinches down, but not so tight that it warps the fabric. Now I'm going to finish off the stitches in this colour, and then I will come back to show you how we would end this piece of thread. So once we're finished with that piece of thread, we can turn over our piece, and then all we need to do to finish this off is just to run our needle under a couple of the stitches at the back. Pull that all the way through, and now that piece of thread is secured, and we can snip it off near the base. Now we're going to move on to our next colour. This is one of the DMC solid colours, in this case 3809. I'm going to show you a different method for starting your thread and a different method for stitching your crosses. So first we're going to do is we're going to grab our 3809 off our little thread card. Now these next two techniques I'm going to show you, I wouldn't recommend using with any of the VAR threads. These should only be used on the solid colours. The first thing we're going to learn how to do is a loop start. This is my absolute favourite way to start a piece of thread and cross stitch. So we need to first grab one strand of thread from our bundle of 6. I tend to just pull one out while gently holding the rest of them, and it always seems to come out quite smoothly. Now once you have your one strand, you need to match up the two ends. You're essentially doubling over your strand of thread, so you have 2 strands of thread to work with. You will then grab the end with the loop, find your needle, and then thread your needle onto that loop. You'll then pull that loop all the way down so that near the eye of your needle you have the 2 cut ends. So what we want to see is one end with a loop and one end with the needle. Now I'm going to start in the middle of my jandal just because I find it the easiest place to see where I'm going to be starting. And then I'm going to poke my needle through the front of the fabric this time into the bottom left hole. I'm going to pull that all the way through until just a bit of the loop remains on the front. I'll then move that out of the way so you can see better. And then from the back, I'm going to come up that top right hole. And I'm going to pull my needle, making sure that I don't lose that loop to the back. I'm then going to poke my needle through that loop to secure my thread. You could then poke your needle through the hole. I usually do the bottom left hole, and that just pulls that loop around to the back. And now your thread is secured and you can continue stitching. So I'm just going to complete this X here, as we have done before, by going from the bottom right to the top left. Now I'm going to show you a technique when you have multiple stitches in a line. This next line has 3 stitches in a row. So what we're going to do for this is go from the bottom left to the top right again, as we have done before. But instead of completing that cross, we're just going to go across our 3 stitches, doing the bottom leg for each stitch. Once we've done that, we can go back across and do the top leg for each stitch, going from the bottom right to the top left. Now I'll continue this and complete all the other Y stitches. Once you're done, you should have something that looks like this. Check out my other tutorials for how you could finish this piece.